I spent the weekend in Knoxville for the Georgia-Tennessee game with my 3 boys. It was my first time in Neyland Stadium with all 3 boys, and despite the game outcome, the stadium, the crowd, and the overwhelming experience of a Saturday in Knoxville left all 3 of them in awe. At the start of the game, my first grader said, "Are half the people in America in the stadium right now, Dad?" As we walked into the stadium, he said, "There is so much orange, Dad. How is there this much orange anywhere?" Seeing sports through the eyes of your kids is one of my favorite parenting experiences. It takes you back to the earliest days of your own fandom, before you were a jaded and cynical adult. I still remember my first SEC football game well, awe.At Tennessee on September 14, 1985. I was 6 years old and the game ended in a 26-26 tie. I'm confident my own kids will remember this day for the rest of their lives. You never forget your first big college football game. You just don't. The end result of the game. Georgia pretty much guaranteed itself a playoff spot with the win, and Josh Heupel, who should finish 7-5 at Tennessee in year 1, saw that he needs to have some better horses if he's going to compete for 60 minutes with the top teams in the country.
At least the first quarter was fun. Okay, let's get on to the starting 11.1. Georgia is in the playoff. Who else joins the Bulldogs there? Georgia running back James Cook points to fans as he scores a touchdown during the first half of an NCAA college football game against Tennessee, Saturday, November 13, 2021, in Knoxville, 10. Right now my playoff 4 would be as follows: 1. Georgia 2. Alabama 3. Oregon 4. Ohio State. That's pretty much everyone's top 4 right now. But what's interesting is this: who else is out there if some of these teams stumble? That's especially the case because we really have 3 spots still up for grabs and not that many teams with good resumes. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State are both still 1-loss Big 12 teams. Cincinnati is probably going to finish undefeated, but doesn't appear to have much juice with the playoff committee. Then we have 3 1-loss Big 10 teams, Ohio State, Michigan State, and Michigan. Meanwhile, Notre Dame is still out there lurking as a potential 11-1 finisher as well. Why do I raise all of these issues, which I'll unpack below? Because there's a decent chance that before all is done, some 2-loss teams could end up in the playoff mix. Really point 2. So what do FanDuel National Title tell us about how odds makers are breaking down the playoff race? Here's the top 13 title contenders. As you can see, after the top 3 the odds drop precipitously. Georgia -125, Ohio State +350, Alabama +450, Oregon 31, Oklahoma 43-1, Oklahoma State 50-1, Michigan 50-1, Cincinnati 60-1, Notre Dame 80-1, Wake Forest 100-1, Michigan State 100-1, Wisconsin 200-1, Utah 300-1. We know Georgia is pretty much a lock for the playoff at this point, but the other 3 playoff spots are still pretty much wide open. And there are at least 10 teams who could make some form of conceivable playoff case if everything broke perfectly for them. So let's break all this down. Point 3. First up, what happens in the Big Ten? Ohio State is playing the best football in the Big Ten right now. The Buckeyes are undefeated in conference play, crushing most opponents, and finish with the State of Michigan on the schedule, the Spartans at home on Saturday and then at Michigan in 2 weeks. If the Buckeyes win both games, then they'll be in the Big Ten title game against, most likely, Wisconsin. Michigan State finishes at Ohio State and then with Penn State at home. Michigan finishes at Maryland and then with Ohio State at home. So the Big Ten East feels like it will come down to Ohio State at Michigan in 2 weeks. But things could get really wacky too. What if Michigan State upsets Ohio State this coming weekend? Then the Buckeyes are probably out of Big Ten title contention. Penn State would have to upset Michigan State, but they could still ruin Michigan's season. And no matter who emerges from the Big Ten East, Wisconsin is lurking, and based on how the Badgers are playing, they have a very real chance to pull off the upset, meaning the Big Ten might not get any team at all in the playoff because every Big Ten East team could end up with 2 losses and 3-loss Wisconsin might win the title. So 0 playoff teams is possible, but the best-case scenario for the Big Ten could still be 2 playoff teams. How would that happen? If Michigan State and Michigan both won out, Michigan State would go to the Big Ten title game and Michigan would be left out at 11-1. If Michigan State beat Wisconsin to win the Big Ten title, 12-1 Michigan State is definitely in the playoff, but Michigan, at 11-1, might make the playoff too. So with 2 weeks left in the regular season, the Big Ten has a potential end-of-season run that leaves them with 2, 1, or 0 playoff teams. But the most likely Big Ten playoff path remains Ohio State wins out. If the Buckeyes win out, no matter what else happens, thanks to the Oklahoma loss, there is now no scenario where 12-1 Big Ten champ Ohio State isn't in the playoff. 4. Who plays in the Big 12 title game and is the Big 12 still alive in the playoff race? Oklahoma State running back Jalen Warren celebrates following his touchdown during the first half of the team's NCAA college football game against TCU on Saturday, November 13, 2021, in Stillwater, Oklahoma. First, yes, the Big 12 is still very much alive in the playoff race. I think a 12-1 Big 12 champ Oklahoma or Oklahoma State would both end up in the playoff. But, frankly, I'm not that optimistic anyone finishes 12-1. Which means a playoff spot may not materialize either. Right now you have Oklahoma and Oklahoma State tied at the top of the standings at 6-1. Then Baylor is lurking at 5-2. Oklahoma finishes with Iowa State and at Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State finishes at Texas Tech, what a win for the Red Raiders yesterday, and with Oklahoma. Baylor finishes at Kansas State and with Texas Tech. The most likely outcome, in my opinion, is we get a rematch of Bedlam in the Big 12 title game on back-to-back weeks. But if Oklahoma State wins out and Baylor wins out, then it would be Oklahoma State and Baylor in the Big 12 title game. The only way Oklahoma State doesn't make the Big 12 title game is if the Cowboys lose out and Baylor wins out. The point is, there are a ton of scenarios still at play here. If, and it's a big if, either Oklahoma or Oklahoma State can finish 12-1, I still feel like there's a very good chance the Big 12 champ will make the playoff. 5. Can Oregon run the table in the Pop 12? Oregon plays at Utah and then they play Oregon State. There's a strong chance the Pop 12 title game will be Oregon against Utah, the rematch of the game that will be played this coming weekend.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe